Greetings to all learners. I welcome you all learners for this bridge course session of physics. I, Suraj Mashalkar, Assistant Professor at the All India Shri Shivaji Memorial Society's College of Hotel Management and Catering Technology, will like to welcome you for this session. In today's topic, we will discuss latent heat and latent heat transfer. Before we begin to this session, the objectives of the session are: first, to learn about the meaning of latent heat, to learn about the various phases of matter, to learn about the various changes of phases of matter, and the last would be to learn about the types of heat transfer, that is, the latent heat transfer, which would be heat of fusion and heat of vaporization. So let's begin with the topic. What do you mean by latent heat? Latent heat is also known as latent energy or heat of transformation. It is defined as the energy released or observed by a body, which can also be defined as the heat or energy that is observed and released during the phase change of a substance. It could either be from a gas to a liquid or a liquid to a solid state, and also vice versa. Latent heat is related to heat properties called enthalpy. Latent heat can be understood as the hidden energy which is supplied or extracted to change the state of a substance without changing its temperature or pressure. This includes the latent heat of fusion, that is, from solid to liquid. Then the latent heat of vaporization, which is liquid to gas. And the latent heat of the last, that is sublimation, that is solid to gaseous directly. Let's take an example. Let us assume a solid substance is changing to a liquid. Imagine the frozen ice creams, that is melting. It needs to absorb energy to push the molecules in a wider or more fluid volume. Similarly, when a substance changes from a gas phase to a liquid, converting gas to a liquefied state for our gas cylinders at home, its density levels also needs to be a lower to a higher level, wherein the substance then needs to release or lose energy so that the molecules can come closer together. In essence, this energy that is required by a substance to either freeze, melt, or boil is said to be latent heat. The term was introduced around 1762 by a Scottish chemist, Joseph Black. Black used the term in context of calorimeter, where a heat transferred caused a volume change in a body while its temperature was constant. Next is the phases change to a more energetic state include the following. First one is melting, that is, from a solid state or a solid phase to a liquid phase. The next one is a vaporization, also called as evaporation, where a liquid changes to a gaseous state, which includes boiling and evaporation. Whereas the last stage is, or the last phase is sublimation, which is from solids to directly moving to the gaseous state. Phase changes to a less energetic states are also seen, which are as follows. The first one is condensation, where the gas turns to a liquid, and we have is freezing, that is liquids to solids. Let's discuss about each of them in detail. Change of phase from solid to liquid. As a solid is heated, its particles vibrate more rapidly as it absorbs kinetic energy. Eventually, the organization of particles within the solid structure begins to break down, and the solids starts to melt. The melting point is the temperature at which a solid changes into a liquid. If we take some ice cubes and heat, what we will see after a while is that the ice cubes are dissolving in its own liquid. After gaining sufficient energy, the molecules of ice escape out of the ice cube and into the container, and in doing so undergo a change in state from solid to liquid. As we keep heating, the ice cubes gradually become smaller and turn into water. This change of state is referred to as melting, and it is a change of state from solid to liquid. The temperature at which melting takes place is called a melting point. For example of melting points, the melting point of solid oxygen is minus 218.4 degrees Celsius. For iron is 1530 degrees centigrades. For silver is 961 degrees centigrade, whereas for ice starts melting as soon as the temperature is increased from 0 degree centigrade. Now let us move to the next part, that is evaporation, that the changes of phase from liquid to gas. An important point that we have to remember regarding latent heat is that the temperature of the substance remains constant. Only the phase or the state of the substance changes. Vaporization or evaporation is described as the process by which an element or a compound changes from its liquid state to its gaseous state. As an example, we consider the process by which liquid water enters the atmosphere as water vapors in the water cycle. Evaporation, mostly from the oceans and from trees and plants, replenishes the humidity in the air. It is an important part of the exchange of energies in Earth atmosphere system that results in weather and climates. Example of the same is water is stored in earthen pots to make it cool. The pores of the earthen pot, just like the pores of the cotton cloth, provide a larger surface area for more evaporation. Boiling is the process when a liquid changing phase to a gas due to application of heat. Boiling point of some elements are water. We all know it boils at 100 degrees centigrades. Ethyl alcohol, which boils at 78.5 degrees centigrade. Acetone 50.5 degrees centigrade, whereas milk boils at 95 degrees centigrade. Evaporation, one example is during the maturation of a spirit. Let's take an example of a brandy. While maturation, a 2.5% of brandy is evaporated due to the latent heat and the pores in the oak barrels. That is termed as evaporation, or also called as vaporization. Now on the third type of change of phase, that is solid to direct gaseous state, which is called as sublimation. We can define sublimation as transition of a substance from the solid phase to direct gaseous phase without changing into liquid phase. If solid possess sufficient vapor pressures at a particular temperature, then they can directly sublime into the air. A very well-known example of sublimation is naphthalene, which is an organic compound. Naphthalene is usually found in pesticides such as mothballs. We keep these balls in our suitcase, cupboards, and if you check them, after a while the mothballs are not there and neither the residues is, which shows that it has sublimations. The next stage is a condensation. Condensation is the process where water vapor becomes liquid. It is the reverse action of evaporation, where liquid water becomes a vapor. Condensation happens one of the two ways. Either the air is cooled and its dew point, or it becomes so saturated with water vapors that it cannot hold any more water. Condensation can also produce water droplets on the outside of soda cans or glasses of water which is cold. When warm air hits the cold surface, its temperature reaches its dew point and condenses. This leaves droplets of water on the glass or on can. The next one is freezing. Freezing refers to the phase change of a substance from the liquid state to the solid state. This is a phase change phenomena which means that a substance is transformed from one state of matter to another state. Different substances freeze at different temperature because the molecules that make them up are different. So when they move closer, they attract each other in different manner. Let us discuss some of the different types of heat transfers that can occur. It mainly has two types. One is the latent heat of fusion. The second is the latent heat of vaporization. Now coming to latent heat of fusion. The latent heat of fusion is the heat consumed or discharged when a matter melts, changing the state from solid to fluid structure, that is the liquid structure, at a consistent temperature. It is the amount of energy that must be supplied to a solid substance, typically in a form of heat, in order to bring a change in its physical state and get converted it into a liquid, but this will be applicable when the pressure of the environment is kept constant. The latent heat of fusion is also referred to as enthalpy of fusion. It is this latent heat that allows you to keep a beverage cold for much longer by adding ice. It's also why frozen meat takes a long time to thaw. But once it's thawed, it heats up quickly. Ice and water have enormous latent heat associated with them, which is why snow takes so long to melt and boiling water is used for cooking. Now, the opposite of latent heat of fusion is the latent heat of solidification, which is the amount of energy that must be supplied to a liquid in order to facilitate a phase change and the conversion of liquid into a solid. The temperature at which substance undergoes the phase transmission is called the melting point of the substance. This temperature point can be referred to as the freezing point of the substance when the heat of solidification is being transferred. Let's move to the next one, that is latent heat of vaporization. The latent heat of vaporization is the thermal energy required for a liquid to vaporize to a gas, or the amount of thermal energy that is released when a gas condenses to a liquid. The latent heat of vaporization is also referred to as the enthalpy of vaporization. Water has high latent heat of vaporization, which is why steam can cause severe burns when steam burns a person's arm. For example, this energy transfer causes the steam to condense, which uses much more energy than simply changing the temperature. So the burns at the skin surface are severe. Hot water would also burn. However, if a person were to get a hot water burn, that would only change the temperature of the person's hand and the water and will not cause a phase change. Therefore, steam water burns are much worse because a phase change is actually happening. Latent heat is related to no adjustments in temperature, yet a difference in the state. As a result of high heat of the vaporization, the vanishing of water has a cooling impact. Boiling point is the temperature at which liquid changes to gaseous phase during evaporation. Condensation is when gases change and become liquid. So, here we come to the end of the session. Let's have a small recap of the complete session. In this session, we have studied something called as latent heat, or we have defined a latent heat. Latent heat, to define, is an energy released or observed by a body or by a substance during the change of the phase. We have also seen is various phases of matter, that is solid, liquid and gaseous. What we have also done is various changes of phases of matter, in which we have seen something called as melting, where the solids turns into liquid, vaporization, where liquids go to gaseous state, and sublimation, where solid without going into liquid move directly to gaseous. That's the phase change. Whereas we have also seen when a less energetic state, the phase change is condensation, where the gases turn to liquids, and freezing, where the liquids turn to the solids. What we have also seen is types of latent heat transfer, where there is latent heat of fusion and latent heat of vaporization. Thank you so much.